we've gone from pessimism to careful optimism, right? Let's end this with hope, if we can. So I think it was Niels Bohr who is popularly misquoted as having said that it's very difficult to predict things, especially the future. So instead of rather than asking you to predict the future, I'd like to ask you for your hopes about the future. And I'd like to ask you, Ling Ling, about what your ideal future of work would look like. And you, Bernard, what your ideal future of learning would look like.
Well, I can go crazy with this. I like it that you ask me this question because the future of work, to me, will be so crazy, in fact, that work will be shaped around us. Rather, we shape ourselves around work. So what I mean by that, we're already doing it now in terms of the remote companies, how we are in a remote teams, and creating that kind of environment gives the individual the ability to shape the work so that they can perform optimally, to take care of their personal things, and to also learn appropriately. So it's done in remote work. What will go beyond is that with technology, each individual will understand their strengths, their interests, their weaknesses, whatever it may be, and we will have technology to say, I've got this job from this company that suits your strengths, your weakness, your interests. Therefore, I'll transfer this job to you, and you can work in an environment that is optimized for your performance. What I also like about this kind of future is that it is inclusive. So meaning, if you have certain restricted abilities, physical, mental, you still will have the ability to work because the work is shaped around you. So no longer will the individual will have to get education just to fit a job description. The job description will fit around the individual.
Very, very interesting.
That's my hope for the future. I know it's a bit crazy, but I think we're going to get there soon. I saw a startup that focuses on this.
I definitely share that hope. I think it's something really even to look forward to. Me as an entrepreneur anyway, right, who doesn't necessarily fit in traditional boxes, I would love this kind of future for myself at any rate.
Yeah.
So what about your ideal future of learning?
So look, to start with, I love learning, right?
Right.
This must be clear. So for me, the ideal future of learning is more and smarter and more effective learning. So what we really have to understand is that the current education, I'm going to use this word, system that we have today is very much an inheritance from the 19th century when it was put in place, and it hasn't changed much since then. So then the objective was simply to feed the economy in a standard way with workforce that was educated also in a standard way, and people would learn during their formative years, until they were 20, and what they had learned at school would take them until the time they would retire, or more likely until the time they would die, because there wasn't so much retirement. Now, my ideal future of learning will be the result of a triple transformation. First of all, in terms of what we are learning, it's a transformation that we have already witnessing. That's what we're discussing now. It's changing from teaching knowledge, and Asian countries, France, etc., still focus very much on that, right? So changing from teaching knowledge to teaching those skills. Sometimes some people call them deep skills. I heard in your podcast today, or timeless skills. They are all in the same realm. The second transformation is that we thought in the past, as I was saying before, that education would stop when you completed school or university, and you were supposed to be equipped for your entire life. It is not the case any longer, and this is why the concept of lifelong learning is really gaining ground in universities that are now focusing on this. There's a bunch of companies that focus on this. Corporates are also changing a little bit their take, from an L&D of compliance. We have to tick the box to let's make sure people really learn. So from initial learning to lifelong learning. And the third transformation, which you also touched upon, is in the old days, education or rather there was something even worse than education, it was instruction, right? So how does instruction work? You've got a teacher at the blackboard, it's the person who knows.
Yeah.
And the person who knows lectures and doesn't want to hear any single noise except if they ask you to repeat after them. Rote learning, repetition,
Exactly.
etc. That's the old way. Now, learning sciences have made so much progress, and we know how learning can become effective. We know the pillars of learning. There's a very famous French psychologist, Stanislas Dehaene, who has described that very well. And in order to learn, you need to pay attention, you need to be engaged, you need to have some feedback, and you need to have some consolidation. And even these simple notions change the way learning takes place. And in addition to this, now we benefit from a lot of technology that we didn't have in the past. You mentioned augmented reality, so augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality, etc. And of course, artificial intelligence, which is so useful in the field of learning, to personalize learning according to your taste, according to your interest, according to your pace, according to your level. This is adaptive learning, and we owe this to artificial intelligence. So my dream, future learning, from knowledge to skills, from initial to lifelong, and from lecture to, I call that the modern arsenal, of learning.
I love it. And I have to tell you, if AI facilitates these changes and, brings us to a future where these two ideal worlds exist, for me that would just be absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so maybe the conclusion is, on a very French note, education is dead. Long live education. Right?
Let's behead education.
Off with their head. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up because we could keep talking for hours, and I'd like to take deep dives with each of you separately into some of these issues because there's a lot to talk about. Before we take questions from the audience, I would just like to shamelessly because it's not my stuff to plug. So some of their stuff, I warmly recommend Bernard's book. I have to say, I think it's one of the rare books I've read on AI written by someone who isn't from AI that I like. I very strongly oppose people writing fluffy books on topics that they know nothing about because it's the cool thing to do. This is a fantastic book, and it really takes a deep dive in all of these issues that we just covered, and I cannot recommend it warmly enough.
Thank you.
I would also recommend, especially with what's coming, people, if you know what's good for you, to subscribe and listen to Ling Ling's podcast. So I didn't tell you this, but secretly Ling Ling is one of the fastest rising female podcaster of Southeast Asia. She has an amazing podcast called Leaders of Learning. You find it in all the places where you can get podcasts. Please subscribe. And even if you don't, just share it with everyone you know, right? That sharing is caring. All right, well, thank you both very much. Great having you here. If there's any questions from the audience, this is the time.